Okay. Hi, I'm Lyle Yorks, and I'm on the faculty here at Teachers College in the Adult Learning and Leadership program. And this has been a wonderful conference about transformative learning. And actually, for me, transformative learning is really a process of ongoing growth and holistic, development on an ongoing basis. It's like at least for me, there's no end to the journey, so to speak, of continually altering, transforming not only your cognitive frames of reference, but that's where it starts many times, certainly, but also growing much more holistically to be able to have a felt sense of connection with a broader of what's going on. And I think it's there's been a number of folks at the conference so far that have talked about the I-thou usage, and I think that captures what is part of that ongoing journey very well, because it's a process of transforming yourself in many ways, but in the process of doing that, and to truly do that, I believe, it also changes how you are in relationship with others. And I think one of the biggest challenges regarding that, and this just happens to come from the frame of my own experience and work, is becoming aware of the distinctions between emotion and how that is really separating you from others in the world, or other systems in the world and other things in the world, versus a felt sense of how you're really interconnected with the others in the world. And quite often, I think, just conceptually thinking about that is in and of itself, it always has to happen, obviously, but it's also a process of oversimplifying what's actually happening. But to be able to enrich that conceptual frame, you've got to continue to develop the interconnectedness and the felt feeling that you're having, and how you are really in relationship with the others in the world and the other entities in the world, not just other people, not just other humans. And that's a challenge right there when you start to put into the factors of all the different experiences. Everybody has had their own individual experiences, which really differentiates them in many ways. And because those experiences are so different many times, we find ourselves on many times not able to connect with the other. But then you have the other factors that get embedded in the culture around gender, race, ethnicity, various belief systems and so forth. And being able to start to get more of a felt interconnectedness of, okay, when you're reacting emotionally to those kinds of differences, but being able to step back and really trying to understand the experiences of the other, that I think is a substantial part of the transformation process. And I have to say that just looking back in my own sort of journey, which is obviously I'm still a work in progress, for lack of a better word. I'm certainly not saying that I am transformed in any way, shape, or form. I would believe that because of the connections that I've had with others and the interactions with others, it's been a process of continual growth in some ways. And just a very quick sort of illustration of what I'm talking about here is I'm going back to when I was doing my doctoral studies. I actually had a class with Jack Mesereau. And at that time, I was doing a lot of, I was actually teaching in a business school. I had previously been with a consulting firm. I was doing a lot of work that would be related to developing human resources. And at that point in time, there had been a shift several years before between using the word personnel versus using the word human resources. And I remember, and we were always so proud of that shift if you were working or writing or teaching in the human resource development area, things of that nature. And I remember sitting in class one time and Jack said, as he was talking, he just said, the term human resources, people shouldn't be resources for organizations. Organizations should be resources for people. And it just sort of hit me when he said that. It was just, so that's at the cognitive level. I mean, as I remember reflecting on that, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized, yes, that, you know, how we use that language is important at the cognitive level. You know, what do we do with resources? Sometimes we invest in them, sometimes we sell them off, sometimes we exchange them for other resources, and that changed the whole way that I looked at the whole function of human resources. And now, of course, today we have the word human capital. You know, I use that same analogy from Jack. What do we really mean by human capital? And of course, I use it as well. I mean, I understand what it's meant to be able to communicate, but also what do we do with capital? You know, how are the different ways that we deal with capital? And I just throw that out there as one example of sort of a cognitive change in my frame of, you know, reference that then continued to grow. It wasn't an epic change at that point in time, but it's something that I continued to, you know, build on over time. And then there have been many experiences that I've had where it's led me to believe just how much I'm not really connected to the experience of the other. I've been very fortunate in that two of the bosses that I use that term, two of the managers, two of the individuals who I actually worked for early in my career were African-American men, one of which was the first African-American officer at the Travelers Insurance Company. And what I was really fortunate about was that they were also wonderful, you know, mentors. And we spent a lot of time, not just at work, but also in other kinds of conversations, many times just relaxing. And the kind of questions that they would ask me, sometimes when I would say something stupid, they wouldn't get angry. They would just ask me a question about what that was. And it was, every time I would sort of step back and realize, you know what does that really mean about who I am? And what was happening during that period of time, I think, was not only cognitive change, but also understanding there's the need to have more of a having to pursue opportunities to understand what is really the experience of the other, even though I can't have it, but to really vicariously experience it. And I think it was those kinds of experiences that when I came across the work of John Heron, which I talk about, I actually presented on along with Elizabeth Castle at this conference, when I first came across the work of John Heron, that created a frame of reference to help me interpret, okay, what has been my path of growth? And I was able to really, you know, connect with Heron's work from that standpoint. And to just sort of summarize here, what I have found about the experience of studying and then working in the field of adult education, adult learning, is that not only has it helped me in my professional work, but it's also provided a set of frameworks for really interpreting and understanding my own experience. So, you know, I was initially trained as an organizational sociologist at Vanderbilt, the first part of my graduate work. And then because of the consulting firm I worked with, I was getting informal learning through working with a firm where there were a lot of very well-known, you know, PhD, you know, psychologists. So while I wasn't taking courses, I was informally learning about that all the time. And then transitioning over to adult learning and adult education, I learned a more comprehensive theory that allows you to use some of those other frames of, you know, practice in a somewhat, you know, different way. But it also allows me to continue to self-reflect on my own experience. And from that, the only conclusion I have is I'm still a work in progress. So with that, sorry to be sort of rambling on, but just sort of sharing my own thoughts on, and there's been a number of experiences that I've had at the current conferences that's just added. There are ideas that I need to continue to reflect on because, in fact, I just came from a session that has raised some interesting questions for me about maybe even some of my own interpretations of what's, you know, happening. So that's what I'm really grateful for the field. So with that, I will do something that's very hard for any professor to do, and I'll stop talking. Thank you.